Welcome into Cleveland Browns Daily from Maria, Nathan Zegura, and Gibby with you for the next 2 hours. Beau Bishop will be back on Thursday. He is on assignment, according to Gibby on Twitter. On assignment, which means he's enjoying himself. But I want to enjoy myself, and the NCAA tournament's not letting me because last night I was pissed. 10 o'clock.
And not just because Arkansas lost.
No, which I needed that to go. I only put them in my bracket because I knew nothing about college hoops this year because my buddy Vince Conti, friend of the show, had them winning his bracket that he posted on Instagram. So I was like, all right, I'll have them go to the Final Four. But I'm still in the driver's seat. If Gonzaga wins the tournament, I'm gonna win. I'll win my bracket. So, and the Zags are looking pretty good so far. So they got to take care of business tonight. But the fact that I want to watch the Michigan game, and not just for us, but for all of us, 10 o'clock tip? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm 40. Am I old now that I don't want, like, a 10 o'clock? And these games take a lot longer than your average basketball. It's an eternity in the second half.
Yeah. Again.
How is this a good idea?
Why did we change this and go Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday? What was not working on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday that we had to move it?
And correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe I am wrong, but were the tip times on Saturday and Sunday of the Elite Eight in the past, were they 7 and
No.
No, right.
No.
Right. Of course not.
Maybe on like Saturday they were, but like Sunday was like 3 and 6.
I bet Saturday was the same because you want that primetime game. But on a Friday, a 10 o'clock game on a Friday is we can be out at a sport, we can be out, we can be in, we can be having a good time. Saturday's tomorrow, we're in great shape. Even on Thursday, a lot of people treat Thursday like a Friday, and Friday's Friday. But on a Monday into a Tuesday, and then a Tuesday into a first Friday, it just – I don't know what they're doing. I don't get it. I don't like it either. I would like these games to start why can't we do a 5:30 and an 8:30? And what about on the West Coast? Listen, I'm from California. I get it. But the tournament is something that's super easy to have on in your office. Like, you close these doors. We got pro days going on right now. You could have the tournament on even 6 and 9. 6 and 9 feels a heck of a lot different.
Yeah. Yeah, because
I don't know. Maybe I'm old.
Get
off my lawn.
You're not. This is – and there – I think there's some – are there fans, not fans? I feel like there's some, but there's definitely not a lot. Maybe it's just friends and family. I don't really know what's going on, but there's no sizzle whatsoever with the NCAA tournament.
No.
And I don't care about Houston. I don't care about I don't know.
I watched some of that game, not all, some. Is their whole offense just lets miss shots and get offensive rebounds? It's what it seems like.
Kind of was a theme for them last night.
Nobody in that game, they played Houston, Oregon State. Nobody could shoot free throws in that game. I mean, it was one of the worst free throw shooting displays I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's kind of been a theme for the whole tournament. The fundamentals totally escaping. Hey, we're just going to go down and jack up 30-foot shots.
Right now, does it feel to you like anybody can beat Gonzaga?
Who do they play?
They play tonight at 7, and then they play the winner of the Michigan game. So tonight they play, I think it's USC.
I mean, they should roll USC.
And then they play the winner of Michigan, UCLA.
I mean, Michigan's pretty good defensively.
I mean, Gonzaga's 29-0.
Yeah.
Like, they might have a perfect season.
Baylor's pretty good, too.
Baylor's pretty good?
Yeah.
I don't want to hear that.
They beat your Hogs last night.
Yeah,
They're a pretty good basketball team.
Baylor against Houston. Yeah, Baylor I think could get in there. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think my wife has picked Baylor out of nowhere.
Really?
Yeah.
Good job by her.
They are a 1 seed. We're not gonna.
Yeah,
that's too crazy.
Here's the thing:
she has Baylor winning it.
Barring some kind of total collapse, you're gonna have 3 1s and a 2, which is what you should have. So they did.
They got that right in what is a very strange season. A very strange season. They got that right, which is, and maybe it's kind of amazing though to think Arizona, I think, is doing well in the NIT. The Pac-12 maybe should just let everybody in because Pac-12's played pretty well in this tournament. It's just a it's a strange one, but it doesn't even feel like the tournament because the games are being played on Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, I was telling you, like, I was tired. I went to bed. It was almost 10 o'clock. It was maybe just a little bit after, and I got the notification that Game 2 was starting last night. I was like, yeah, no, this is not happening tonight.
No. And our Ohio Business Machine hot topics, OBM, the Ohio Business Machine, preferred copier provider of the Cleveland Browns of all the X's and O's for your office. Call 216-485-2000 or visit ohiobusinessmachines.com. One of ours is that Pat McAfee says we're officially in sports purgatory right now. I kind of agree, and I'll give you a couple reasons for it. Well, one, I'm excited about the Masters coming up. I always love the Masters, so that's coming up in April 10th?
Next weekend, I believe. Not this
The weekend
coming,
after, right,
yeah.
The weekend after Easter. Yeah, April 10th, that weekend. You've got the tournament's wrapping up. We'll be wrapping up, obviously, next weekend as well. I'm not so sure that it has, as you mentioned, the juice that it normally would have. I think some of the day changes have had something to do with that, but tournament's always still fun. Then we get the Masters. Baseball's coming back. I know there are a lot of people excited about baseball. There are a lot of people not as excited about baseball. It doesn't have the cachet. NBA is in the regular season, which I don't know that anybody's really caring much about it. Super teams are being amassed, though. We're seeing the Lakers. Drummond went to the Lakers, right?
Yeah.
And then Blake Griffin and
to the Nets?
Yeah. And somebody else to the Nets, right?
Yes.
LaMarcus Aldridge?
Yes.
It's going to be fun to see. So they've got –
But I don't think the playoffs start till May or something. They moved everything back.
Right. But they'll have Kyrie, Harden,
Kyrie.
Durant,
Kyrie feels like
Blake, and LaMarcus Aldridge. That's a pretty good five. And then the Lakers' big three now will be LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Drummond. But I think we kind of are in sports purgatory. And I think as a Browns fan, you would say, wait a second. We haven't even gotten to the draft. That would be normally they're dueling quarterback pro days going on right now. Don't care.
No one cares.
But we especially don't care.
Yeah.
We would be glued to these. We would be breaking down every throw. We'd have people calling in from the pro days. Well, what did you see? How was this? How was that? And we'll tell you, Mac Jones looks fine. I think that when you look at the people in attendance, that the 49ers' entire brass is there. I think that's just them playing around. I think they're messing with people. Justin Fields ran a 4.440, courtesy of our good friend Cleve TA. I've got the full list of quarterbacks who have ever run 4.5 or better. Now, many of those are combine times, but here's the list. RG3, Tyrod Taylor, Reggie McNeil, Marcus Vick, Vince Young, Michael Vick. Now, would you say that any of these went on to be great NFL quarterbacks?
I was going to say, clearly,
no,
because you run fast.
No. Vic, obviously the most accomplished. Vince Young, couple playoff seasons, and obviously RG3 had that great start to his career. But certainly that is a blazing time for him. How does that impact his draft stock? I don't know. He was impressive there. I thought he was impressive. And ran the 4.4, 4.45, and I think that's good. I know a lot of people in Ohio think he's the second best quarterback in this draft behind Trevor Lawrence because that's who we've seen. We've seen Lawrence, we've seen Justin Fields. I've seen them both 100 times more than I've seen a Zach Wilson or a Trey Lance game.
It's very interesting how many people are at Alabama's pro day ahead of Ohio State's pro day. Now, again, Alabama has 13 guys potentially. Matt Miller thought there were 13 guys that could be drafted, from Alabama this year. But he's got Ohio State having 11 potentially. And, I mean, it's a who's who. They just showed from right to left, right side, Josh McDaniels, Bill Belichick. Middle, Nick Saban. Left side, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan. Like, the royalty is really at Alabama's pro day. Outside of Urban Meyer at Ohio State's pro day, I don't know how many head coaches are at Ohio State's pro day. Tomlin might be there from Pittsburgh, but
interesting.
There was only one team not at a pro day, one of these two, and it was the Rams. The Rams don't have a pick.
Well, they don't pick. Yeah, they have no picks. Yeah, 13 potential picks. Buckeyes 11 potentially. Mel Kiper's top 10 position rankings. OSU has 8. Bama has 10. Both going out at the same time. I'd go to Ohio State 'cause it's closer.
Yeah,
that's what if it was
again.
If I had to go
I would look at tape. These guys are. You said it yourself. Having a great run today. Having a great job throwing the ball against air.
Mac Jones looks to me like he could be solid, but there's nothing about him that makes me say, wow. And so, Justin Fields, that's a wow time. He makes some wild throws. Zach Wilson's got an absolute cannon. Trey Lance is huge and has all the gifts. He's a tools guy. Lawrence is the best quarterback prospect we've seen in years. Mac Jones, I think all this talk that he's going to be there at 3 or that the Niners might take him, and maybe they do. Maybe Kyle sees him as a better Kirk Cousins or, as a smaller Matt Ryan that he can win with. I don't know about that. I don't. He doesn't strike me as somebody that you give up 3 first-round picks to go get. But, again, all that matters is their evaluations. We all know that. It's whatever their evaluations are.
Well, you said it yourself. These teams don't want to be in this spot a year from now.
Right.
The 49ers think that they're a much better team, and they are, than what their draft placement is and what their final record was from this past year.
It's again, this is such an interesting time because now the Niners have done this, right? All the talk about the draft is going to be what happens at pick 3. What happens at pick 3? Now there's another sub. Where does Sam Darnold go? What ends up happening with Sam Darnold in New York? This, when you think about the Shanahans, for example, Chris Sims was saying, and we know that he knows Kyle very well, but that, he thinks it's Mac Jones. He's the most NFL ready. Kyle already said at Monday's press conference, which, by the way, do you see what he said about Chris Sims?
Yeah.
He said, trust me, Chris talks about everything. Therefore, I haven't been able to talk to him in a couple of years. Anyone who you're friends with who speaks in the media and people think you're friends with them, that means you're not allowed to tell them anything. That's why he doesn't even ask me stuff, because if he does ask me something and I tell him, then he can't say it. And he wants to be able to say it and not have to worry about that. So he said, now that you're up at 3, you don't have to hide as much. But he said it's very important to him to be coy, and they want to be secret, something he learned from his dad, that it's very important to be secret at pre-draft. And all the people are saying he wants a pro-ready guy. Think about what Mike Shanahan, when he shocked the world, traded up. Who did he go get? Jay Cutler, a guy with a cannon, a tools guy. And I saw that line of thinking, and that seemed to make a lot of sense to me. I think you could see – I think it could be Lance. I think it could be Fields. I would be much more surprised if it's Mac Jones than the other two. I know nothing about what Kyle wants to do. I just would be that it would this, especially with all this going on right now. That says to me,
this is a circus down here.
Yeah, that says to me, smoke screen. Forget about it. Justin Fields, incredibly talented. I think we've seen him a lot more than we've seen Trey Lance, who played for North Dakota State, but interesting prospect. And I think what's cool is, as we go through this, we'll get more of the draft people on. Again, number one, we don't have to worry about these guys. It's fun to talk about because now it's what's so interesting about the start of the draft. And we need to be interested in the entertainment of the start of the draft because we got to wait hours and hours on draft night before we pick because we were good. So we won 12 games this year. So that's where we're at. By the way, coming up on today's show, Mike Clay, the ESPN NFL analyst, is calling in on the Fifth Third money line. He's going to talk free agents, about what the Browns did, where he has the Browns roster now as it sits in the league. At 2 o'clock, we've got Gribbs coming on the show to take a look at the defense 2 weeks into free agency. That'll be moderated by the great Gibbe. Mel Kiper Jr., his big board is out, top 5 at each position out. Top 10 at each position out. We'll take a look at those, especially defensive ends and cornerbacks. Jalen Phillips shooting up these boards after what he did at Miami's Pro Day. One thing I'm curious about, does he combine, it seems, my guess reading this list is that he does not combine defensive ends. He doesn't have an edge list. He has defensive ends and 3-4 outside linebackers. I'll take a look at that when we go to there because, for example, Azeez Ujulari is not on this list out of Georgia, and I would think he's in his top 10 pass rushers. So we'll take a look at those. The cornerbacks as well. Farley, Surtain, Horn, Newsome. We'll talk that. And then Nick Shook. He'll call us about Brown's free agency. We'll talk draft with Nick Shook. That's at 2:30. So we are loaded up here. When we come back, we are going to go around the league. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily. If you live and breathe football, you know sometimes keeping your priorities straight can be a challenge. Unfortunately, the same can be true when you gamble. If you find your gambling is affecting other parts of your life, we can help. Get tips on responsible gambling at keepitfunohio.com. Gibby.
Yes, sir.
We weren't on air, so nobody got to hear it, but those on the stream side, I did a little tap there. I forgot I went back to my trusty light.
I was looking and watching and hoping you were going to screw it up.
I didn't screw it up.
No, you didn't. You recovered.
I recovered, but I did. It's still old habits. I've been tapping the mic for years, but now we got this beautiful light. It does bring a tear to my eye every time we see it. All right, let's go around the league, Gibby. Virtual owners meeting starting about 1 o'clock today, and today and tomorrow. Rule changes will be discussed next month, but could be interesting to see how things play out between the owners and the NFLPA as it pertains to virtual or an in-person off-season. That's a big thing. I was, thinking about coming up May, June. Are we going to have a rookie minicamp here in Berea? Are we going to have OTAs? Are we going to have a mandatory all team-wide minicamp, or are we going to have none of that? Because that changes the way the offseason goes, certainly around this building between now and the end of July or whenever training camp would start. You're going to need, I would guess, like last year, if you don't have your typical offseason program, would you need that 2-week ramp-up period again before training camp because nobody will have been here all year? I think this is going to be a showdown. The players are going to say, we delivered a great product for you last year. We didn't do this. We don't want to do it.
Yeah, I think they're digging in.
And I think the NFL is saying, okay, that's great. That's great, but no, you're going to go do these things.
As a league, we lost $4 billion.
Let's get back to how we were doing business before. I hope that they arrive at some kind of a middle ground. I hope that what I don't want is a completely virtual offseason again. I hope they arrive at something that says, okay, we'll come in, do a week or two of conditioning, 1 week of an OTA, and then we'll do, a 3-day mini camp, and that's it. So you're just here for, all told, 3.5 weeks.
Yep.
And then you can go, as opposed to, when you're here for the 3 weeks of workouts, and then you're here for the on-field activities. Then you get to the OTAs, and then you get 10. The 10 OTAs take 3 weeks. Like let's just knock this out in a 1-month period. So say the draft is here. Say from the middle of May until the middle of June, you're back, and that's it. And then you get to go. But I hope that they don't have a fully virtual off season again. I think it's valuable to the guys, certainly the young guys. It's valuable to, Donovan Peoples-Jones, for example. Would Donovan Peoples-Jones have been ready to be in the lineup earlier? I don't know. He wasn't active until the Dallas game, and he obviously ended up being a nice contributor for us. I just think and you could say, well, yeah, but we overcame everything. We won, after losing our first game, we won 4 in a row with a new coach, new schemes. We have the same schemes. We have the same guys coming back on offense. I just think it's good. I think it's good. I think it's good for the guys to be around each other. I think we overcame it. We did that. We managed that because of Kevin Stefanski and because of the leaders on the team. We managed that better than the vast majority of the NFL under our circumstances. I think it's good. It's good to see the guys. It's fun, too. It's fun to get them here. It's fun to have some of that stuff.
Is there, and you mentioned it, you said you got to find that middle ground because I don't think it's going to be able to, you're going to be able to go one way or the other and mandatory, make it all mandatory. But is there a way to make the virtual stuff mandatory? And then, like you said, you come in, maybe it's just 2 weeks. Maybe it's the week one, I shouldn't say that, 2 weeks of workouts. You come in for the first week, that you get your physical, you get all that stuff done, you get your testing in, everybody knows, if you've been vaccinated or if you haven't been vaccinated, they got to separate all that. And then you have 2 weeks of workouts. You have a week of OTAs and then a week of mandatory mini camp, and then you send everybody on their way. I mean, like you said, you've got to have something for the players. I don't think you can go a second consecutive virtual off season.
Look, can you? Yes. But should you? I agree with you. Let's find a middle ground. Let's get them here. And I think it's fun. I think it's fun for the coaches. It's fun for the players. I think it's going to be fun for the city. I think it's fun. It'll be certainly fun for us to have that. There's always a little bit of fun buzz around those types of scenes. So I'm hopeful that they reach a middle ground and they don't say, okay, nobody's coming to the facilities until July. But we'll see. I think that's the biggest thing that they've got on the table.
I mean, if you're the team, do you move up everything in July? Like that 2 week ramp up period, instead of at the end of July when training camp should start, is that 2 week ramp up? Well, don't forget, to middle July, or is that a CBA issue?
Don't forget, you're only going to have 3 preseason games, so you're gaining a week of no game
playing.
of a no game playing in that. So that's an extra week that even if you want to have a full 2-week ramp up before normal training camp, now you only need to go a week earlier than you typically would have because you're losing a week of games. That's going to be this. I think this is the biggest kind of showdown they've got coming up. We know that the NFL is going to 17 games. We know that they're going to the 3 preseason games. I do think we are going to end up with, the sky judge. I think that will happen. I know you said the rules are next month for rule changes.
Yeah, they were supposed to be this week at the owners' meetings, but with it being virtual, they're moving everything. They're hopeful that by the end of April, maybe the week before the draft, they can get everybody together and go through all of this stuff. Their whole thing is they're worried about people losing focus 2 hours in on a Zoom.
Well,
it's rightfully so.
Yeah, that's a long time to be on a Zoom. That's a very long time. So I think that's the biggest thing facing the NFL right now is what's the off season going to look like?
I mean, you've got to make some decisions and make them quick here because technically I think if you have a new coach, you're supposed to be able to start like 10 days from now.
Right, right.
They got to make some decisions and make it quick. And then I think the Browns reporting like the 19th maybe? Something along those lines? If there is an off season.
If there is one. May 19th?
No, April.
Oh, the players would.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
For OTAs.
That's not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. But I could say that could end up being the middle of May and have just a 1 month, middle of May, middle of June, you're off until you come back. But that's going to be interesting. The another item that's presented, every team would have a neutral site or an international game once every 8 years. I think that's fine. I have no problem with that. I do have a thought process, though, that would be cool to, and this is something, I was on Sirius XM NFL Radio. I remember I filled in for somebody one morning. It was me and Ross Tucker did a 4-hour show. One of the things we came up with were cool neutral site games. And I almost think that this 17th game should be a neutral site geographical game that makes sense every year. So your 17th game, for example, for us would be, let's say every year we played the Bears at Notre Dame. A
little college stadium
right,
tour?
Like do something cool like that. So every year we would play the Bears. That would be our 17th game, always a neutral field for both, somewhere in the middle, and that's what you did. Or you could have, right, like you could do that. You could do the Bengals could play somebody at Ohio Stadium, or we could play, obviously, at the Shoe one year. But whatever it is, just mix it, keep it a neutral game. Your 17th game is always the same person, so you add a geographically similar team to you as your 17th every year. Because the way they're going to do it, which is also fair, is this year, for example, the 17th game is going to be all AFC home games. And then next year it's going to be all NFC home games. And I think you'll just go divisions. Will just rotate who they play every year for that extra one because you only play one out of conference division every season. So this will, and then you have two that you play the same place team in this one or that one. I think that would be fun. Just to see an NFL game played in a different venue would be pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, Deacon tells those stories all the time. Like playing preseason games at the University of Washington. They played Green Bay. And they never played at home for preseason games or at another team stadium. They always played in a neutral site. You can make that argument. I'd be up for that.
I just think that would be fun. I think that would be a fun thing. So yeah. I don't know if that's going to ultimately happen. I would guess that it is likely not to happen, but that's what I would like. If everybody's got to play a neutral site game, it says or international game, so they're counting those as different. Why not just build that into that 17th game? So everybody's got 8 home, 8 road. All right, Mike Clay is joining us next, ESPN's NFL analyst. He joins the show when we return here on Cleveland Browns Daily. Welcome back to Cleveland Browns Daily. Nathan Zegura with you, and joining us now on the Fifth Third Money Line, ESPN NFL analyst Mike Clay. Mike, how are you doing? And we really appreciate you coming on in the middle of Pro Day Palooza right now with Ohio State and the Alabama Pro Days going wild out there.
Oh man, there's a million things going on these days. It's crazy. We're as busy as we are covering the NFL during the season. There's so much that goes on in the off season, especially the past couple of years with how the schedule's been kind of spread out more. So just so much to do with the draft and the pro days, but also prepping for next season too. Doing the prognostication I do. I'm already prepping for fantasy football for next season too. So there's just always something to do, guys.
You got it. You're right. There is always something to do. I like that you just tweeted out because, one of the reasons these pro days are taking on even bigger meaning right now is the blockbuster trade from the 49ers. And as you summed up the Adam Schefter podcast so succinctly, Lawrence will go 1, Wilson will go 2, and then the Niners at 3 will take either Lance, Fields, or Mac Jones.
Yeah, that seems to be the thought process right now, right? So it's just, a lot of people are replying to that tweet saying, well, yeah, duh, like obviously. But, it's always good to hear from Adam Schefter, right? I mean, what better source to get it from than Adam Schefter that's hearing the same thing? So, yeah, I think that if the 49ers were looking to move up, which obviously they were, I think they would have probably called the Jets first to get 2 and, have their pick of everyone other than Lawrence. Unless the Jets were going to take the quarterback, right? So there was a little bit of question if that was going to happen, but since they were unwilling to trade to, or the 49ers didn't bother, I think the idea there is they're probably going to take Zach Wilson. So Lawrence, Wilson, and then certainly it's up in the air on who the third quarterback will be.
Yeah, then we'll see how that plays out. The best news, though, you're on Cleveland Browns Daily, and we don't care. I don't know when the last time was that we didn't care about these quarterbacks or their pro days, and this wasn't, this doesn't matter.
Yeah, quite the opposite, right? I mean, and I'm sure we're going down this road. I'm sure that's why I'm here. But the Browns are one of the best teams in the NFL on paper, at least on paper, right? Yep. I mean, they won a playoff game last year, obviously. So it's not like this is out of nowhere, but they've been trending this way for a while. I remember years ago, the year after they, had that really horrific season, I remember writing a column that, look, they had a good off season. This is a 500 team on paper. They're trending the right direction. I believe they went 7-9 that season. And then, it took a little bit of a step back, obviously, a couple years ago.
Sure.
But they were always trending this direction. They had another terrific offseason. And, what can we do with it? There's no games being played right now. All we can do is look at the team on paper and say, this team looks good. This team looks like they got worse, better, whatever it is. And objectively speaking, forget the teams, forget the mascots, the cities. Just look at the players on the roster, the depth, the talent. The Browns have one of the best teams on paper in the NFL. Certainly top 5, maybe top 3. I mean, it is what it is. They're loaded.
And it's music to our ears to hear you say that. Let's kind of go through how you think this team stacks up. And I know you got some flack from some people who I think incorrectly interpreted your tweet about Baker Mayfield, which was, if Baker Mayfield continues to progress, the Browns could win the Super Bowl, which he played very well last year. 20 touchdowns, 2 interceptions down the stretch. I thought you were saying he was good. He took a big leap. If he takes another one, or even continues the performance that we saw last year, that this team can win a Super Bowl. And people got very upset with you about that, Mike.
They did, and maybe that's my part because it's or my fault because it's Twitter and it's hard to make everything perfectly clear. But what people got mad about was I said if you ignore the quarterback situation, the Browns have arguably the best roster in the NFL.
Yep.
But the reason, and that sounds like an insult to Mayfield, but what it's really saying is that other top talented teams, have guys like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. And look, you're unrealistic if you're putting Baker in that category right now. He's not there, right? Those teams are loaded as well, but they have elite quarterback play. But if you forget about that, if you take away Brady, Rodgers, Mahomes, Mayfield, all these guys, the Browns otherwise have probably the best roster in the NFL. So that's what I was saying, right? So you add that into the possibility that Baker takes another step forward, and suddenly you're talking about a powerhouse team in the NFL. So, absolutely not a dig at Baker. He performed outstanding down the stretch last season. I was super high on him coming into the league. I love the guy, and I think they're set up great for a huge breakout season here in 2021.
So when you look at this team on offense, one of the things that was probably pretty easy for you to do was say, oh, they're just running it back. You got the same quarterback, the same backup. You got the top 3 running backs are back. Your fullback is back. All 4 tight ends are back. Your top 7 offensive linemen are back. You lost Kendall Lamb, obviously, who was your backup swing tackle. Your top 5 receivers from a year ago are back. Have you seen, and because I know you go through these rosters every year, number one, have you seen a team just run it back like that? All the coaches are back. I mean, there's no turnover. Maybe they'll add something in the draft on day 2 or day 3, but basically they are just running this offense back and getting Odell Beckham Jr. back into the fold after missing the second half of the season.
Yeah, and not to mention Nick Chubb, who missed half the season, right? I mean, they are a huge chunk of the season. So, and David Njoku, I mean, he missed a chunk. We expect him, at least for now, to be back. So, look, there's always a couple teams like that, but it's super important. And you're right. I mean, you have the coaches. I think about like Tampa Bay, right? We didn't expect it from them, but they have almost everybody back except Antonio Brown for now. But it is rare. And you're right. They have one of the best duos, probably the best duo at running back in the NFL. One of the best duos when healthy in Beckham and Landry at wide receiver, and outstanding trio at tight end, and the best offensive line in the NFL right now. We kind of knew this was coming going into last season, right? I mean, if you didn't think the Browns were going to have one of the best O-lines in the NFL, you weren't really paying attention. You would have needed multiple busts for that to happen. Terrific pass blocking unit. They blocked for the run outstanding last season, and they're all back. So that's super important to me. Always want a team with a good, solid, or even great offensive line, and we know that the Browns have that, and it's going to just make Baker look even better. If he has an extra half second every time he drops back to pass, it's just going to make his life easier and allow him to be super efficient, avoid turnovers, avoid mistakes. And that's another reason why I think they're really set up for a lot of success.
So when you look at the Browns offense in sum, where does this offense rank for you, position group by position group, and then overall for you in the league?
So I have them with my unit grades, at least I have them 5th on paper.
Okay.
So that includes an above average quarterback play. Again, the other teams that are up there that we're talking about with the elite offenses are the Bucs, who get a huge boost from Tom Brady, and the Packers again, who get a boost from Rodgers, and Russell Wilson with Seattle, and Dallas is with a healthy Dallas team is absolutely stacked as well. So he, in terms of that grade 5th, he holds them back a little bit. But again, it's just because of the superstar quarterbacks in the NFL. He could join that group. He could really join that group this season. There's no question. It's a big year. Is he going to be an average or an above average quarterback, or is he going to be an elite quarterback? I think we'll find that out this season. So it is a top 5 overall offense nonetheless.
Right. And look, I don't think anybody should expect 20 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a 10-to-1 ratio for a full season. But if Baker produces another solid season with high completion throws, 30 touchdowns and, 10 interceptions, 10 to 12 somewhere, that's when, in the context of this offense, that I would guess, Mike, is when you would say, okay, that's back-to-back very, very good seasons. Now he's, a top 10 guy, a top 12 guy, top 8 guy, maybe even better than that, depending on how far this team goes.
Yeah, and look, he was the first overall pick in the draft. He could be a top 5 guy, right? He could be an elite quarterback. He could this could be the breakout season for Baker Mayfield, where he just goes nuts and has that season where he shows us he's a top 5 quarterback. I mean, it happens this late. Look at Ryan Tannehill, right? How late he's been nothing short of a top 5 quarterback since he took over for Tennessee. And who saw that coming? I mean, he was probably better than we thought in Miami. But to play at this level the past season and a half is unbelievable. He's just been off the charts in every objective measure you can look at on tape, whatever it is. And Mayfield's, of course, a lot younger, has more pedigree, so and has a great system around him, a great coaching staff. So there's no doubt that the sky's the limit for Baker Mayfield.
All right, so offense, top 5 offense in the NFL. Defensively, I think going into free agency, we all really knew that Andrew Berry needed to address this defense for Joe Woods and address this talent. They did that, at least in the very early portions of free agency. I still think there's some, depth to be added or another significant piece. We know Jadeveon Clowney was in the building, but what do you think of just top level? And then we'll drill into certain positions, but what do you think of just the remaking of this defense with the additions now at all 3 levels that Andrew Berry did here early in the first couple of weeks of free agency?
Yeah, I think going in, it was obvious what they needed to do, and they did it, right? It's really that simple. We knew they had to spend on defense, put their assets toward defense, and shore that group up, because that's where they struggled last season, despite having some pretty decent pieces in place. So that's what they did. You can't ask for much more. I think I think they have a top 10 defense on paper, and they filled a lot of the voids that they had.
Top 10. All right. So when you go through it, where are the strengths on defense as you see it right now?
Okay, so up front, I mean, you like the depth. Obviously, Sheldon Richardson's terrific. You're getting Andrew Billings back.
Yep.
You're hoping to get a lot from him last season, but he did not play. And then Malik Jackson, who's, I mean, at one point, he was a top 10 interior defensive lineman for Jacksonville. And then he went to Philadelphia, dealt with some injuries, didn't work out. But talk about, a really good number 2 or number 3 option inside. Myles Garrett, one of the best in the business. Takk McKinley, that's an interesting name. I like that dart throw because McKinley is a guy who, again, he's missed time with injuries, has struggled to rack up sack totals. But if you look at our ESPN stats and info stat, a pass rush win rate, he's been fantastic in that department throughout his career. So maybe it finally translates for him and turns into a big season. And obviously there's been reports about them talking to Jadeveon Clowney and perhaps someone else along the edge. So we'll see if they add more bodies there. Off-ball linebacker guys, I think that's still a question mark, but you at least brought in new names, guys that have been solid at times in the NFL,
Sure.
like Malcolm Smith, Anthony Walker. You have obviously the group is returning as well that was there, so you have some options at least, and gives you a chance to be solid at the position. And then the big one, we knew what they needed to do, guys. Fix the secondary, and talk about doing a great job. You already have one of the best in Denzel Ward. You bring in Troy Hill, who's been terrific with the Rams. Maybe they get something out of Greedy Williams. Hopefully, if he's healthy, he obviously is high pedigree, a day 2 pick a couple years ago. And then one of the best free agents available, underrated still for some reason, John Johnson. I love this acquisition. He gives you an impact player all over the field. I think he's going to be huge for this Browns defense. And maybe you get Grant Delpit back too. If he's healthy and he can play as well, you're going to have potentially certainly one of the most talented young secondaries in the NFL, but potentially one of the best overall in the league if these guys all pan out.
And how do you kind of view, and obviously I can tell you from here that the level of optimism for both Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams is very, very high, and Grant, they're expecting big things, but how do you kind of factor in to the off-ball linebacker overall equation, a team like the Browns now that, Joe Woods has stated on many occasions, what he wants to do really is have Delpit, John Johnson, and Ronnie Harrison on the field together. And I imagine that is more likely to come at the expense of a linebacker than it is anybody else. So when you look at those kind of things, how does that kind of factor in for what the Browns are going to be defensively?
Yeah, and I absolutely weigh that in, right? So I do the projections over at ESPN, and part of that is defensive player projections, and I take those seriously as well. So, I do have, for example, their off-ball linebackers projected to play less than an average team would, and their safeties to be well above average, assuming that Ronnie Harrison or whoever the third safety ends up being plays about half the snaps. So, and then of course that's going to weigh when I'm weighing how talented a defense is or how good they're going to be when their core 11 are on the field. So, no question, that's something I keep in mind. But the nice thing is, even if let's say Delpit struggles to come back, or Johnson misses time with an injury, or Harrison struggles, whatever it is, you at least have some options there with guys like Smith and Walker, who at times have played 80, 90% of the snaps every game, right? Not to mention you have guys on the roster coming back who may have struggled, sure, but are certainly young players who could potentially make a leap this year that you have that have played those number of snaps. So you have options. You have depth here. You like the setup of a defense just like this.
You do. And so when you look at this, because what's amazing is we are at the point now going into the draft and still with free agents on the board, like you mentioned, Clowney, you could roll out this defense right now into week 1. But when you look at it, where if you're the Browns, knowing that you got you got 4 picks in the first 3 rounds, where are you still looking to add? What would you like to see added to this roster, either in free agency still or in the draft?
I think it's off-ball linebacker still. I just said a bunch of nice things, but if you're looking for a young, high pedigree day 1 or day 2, potentially, a player that could be a starter for you for a long time to come, I think that's the spot where you could look. I think right now I still view edge rusher as a spot where you want to add a body, whether it's a superstar like Clowney or it's a draft pick you want to spend there. And then, I think you have to keep an eye on the status of Greedy Williams. It was great to hear your optimism about Williams and Delpit, but I'll tell you what, I was a little surprised by that because on social media, whenever I post about how excited I am about the Browns and their defense, the fans seem to say, they're not playing, they're a lost cause, which I think is ridiculous. Obviously, they're not doctors. They don't know that. But,
Right.
It's good to hear that optimism. We want to continue to hear that. But at the same time, if Greedy's not ready to go or he's on PUP or whatever it is, you may need more depth at that position. So I still think it's on defense, right? Other than adding depth elsewhere, I think that's the key. I guess a third receiver perhaps, or a third or fourth receiver could be a spot where you look as well. But they bring back Rashad Higgins, you get OBJ back, you at least have some decent options. In an offense, obviously, guys that run a lot of 12 and 21 packages, of course, lots of running backs and tight ends.
Sure.
So it's not a key spot, the third receiver spot there for the Browns offense.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I do think they need another guy in that defensive end room, and you always need more corners. Talking to people around the league, GMs say they can never have enough corners, and I think you're right. Look, the truth is Denzel is great. He's never started more than 12 games in a season. Greedy didn't play last year. You bring in Troy Hill, who's been very reliable once becoming a starter, but behind that, MJ Stewart gave you some good minutes last season, big interceptions in Week 17, and in the wild card win over the Steelers. You got Robert Jackson, Brian Allen, who's kind of bounced around the league, 17 games, and AJ Green, who was the undrafted free agent, but Money Mitch left, and who was our most consistent defender last year, and Kevin Johnson left. And so I think that you're right. I think that there still is a need at that cornerback spot. And, when you're picking 26, the good news is you don't have to fill one particular hole. I think it gives Andrew Berry a lot of flexibility, though, going in this draft, saying, okay, here are a couple things we want to address, but let's just get the best guy on our board here at 26.
Yeah, I'm with you. And keep in mind with Troy Hill, too, not a sure thing, right? Like, he's coming off a great year, but he was in an elite defense,
Sure.
The best defense in the NFL. He was in a great situation. You wonder how much scheme was a part of that. Now, he did play pretty good ball the year before, but last year was the first year where he was just a full-time player playing at a high level. So, and again, he happened to have Jalen Ramsey kind of handling number ones at times, and, Darius Williams was terrific, and he had John Johnson in the secondary there. So, we'll see. I don't think he's a lock to be an above average or star corner, but I do like what I saw from him last season. So I'm optimistic, especially with not having a lot of pressure with Ward on the other side, but still a lot to learn there with Troy Hill.
All right, so overall, break down for me where you've got the Browns and then the rest of the AFC North as you look at their rosters today.
Yeah, so I think they're the favorite for me, which is hard to say because Baltimore is right there. I tweeted something else about them the other day about how their defense has just been so consistently good during the whole John Harbaugh era. So you have to count on that, even if they lost some talent on that side of the ball. And we know that their offense can score with anybody. So that's a big one for the Browns. Can they get over, beat the Ravens? That's going to be the storyline for them here this season. Can they get over the top and beat that Ravens team? I think the Steelers will take a step back. So it's Browns and Ravens very close at the top. I think the Steelers kind of take a step back. They were over their heads a lot last season. We saw that kind of come to fruition down the stretch. And then, of course, the Bengals still a work in progress there. Barring Joe Burrow just breaking out in his second season after missing half of his rookie campaign, I think they're still a year or two away from being super competitive. But I do think it's the Browns. And honestly, would not surprise me at all. And again, people think this is a bold take or a hot take, or I'm just trying to get clicks. I've seen it all, guys. I think the Browns very much could take the 1 seed in the AFC. I think they.
Let's go. Tweet
right?
that out, Gibby.
And I'll tell you what, I hesitated on it. I was looking at it, and I'm looking at my projected standings and all this stuff and power rankings, and I'm like, I always stop and look, does this make sense? Review it again. Does it make sense to say something like this? And I think it does. Like, what can you say? The team is in really good shape almost everywhere, and they're not done. They're not done yet either. So, again, I'm not going to sit here and say Baker Mayfield's as good as Patrick Mahomes, but the roster top to bottom is better than the Chiefs. So it all really comes down to him making that next leap this season, show that he's an above average, perhaps a star quarterback in the NFL. And if he does that, the Browns are going to be really hard to beat.
I love it, Mike. Inject it into our veins. It's just nice to be in a position like this. We're not worried about pro days. We picked 26th in the draft. We do have great talent. We've got great coaching. We've got an excellent front office that seems to continually make sound decisions to improve this football team, not just in the short term, but allow it to also continue that in the long term. So it is an exciting time, and I know you were an early adopter for the Browns. We've been talking for years and years, even going way back to our fantasy days. But once the Browns kind of started to show some signs of life, you were on board. So I like this. Mike Clay, number 1 seed in the AFC. We'll have a party for you when that happens.
Let's go. Let's go.
Go.
Look, like you said, after that 0-16 season, that column is still up there at ESPN.com. People gave me funny looks on campus up here and everything after I published that thing saying that was a 500 team after that offseason, when they went 0-16. So you're right. I was driving that bandwagon, and I'm gonna soak that up as long as I can, because they have really progressed nicely for the past couple of years. So put it on the board. Browns making a Super Bowl run this year.
We certainly appreciate it. We'll talk with you again, Mike. This was great stuff. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks so much for your time.
All right, sounds good. Anytime.
All right, that's Mike Clay. Follow him on Twitter at Mike Clay NFL, the ESPN NFL analyst. Number 1 seed. That's what he said, Gibbe.
I got some news from Pelissero.
I got that. We're gonna leave
you
it.
Do that next.
We'll do that. We'll do that at the top of the hour.
That's
We'll
a
get
tease.
You a little news before Gribbs joins us. And just a reminder, all guests who appear on CBD, like Mike Clay just did, appear via the Fifth Third Money Line. Fifth Third Bank, making Cleveland Browns daily a Fifth Third better. News, Gribbs, hour 2 next. Welcome back into Cleveland Browns Daily. Injuries during childbirth require experienced counsel. Call the lawyers at Elk & Elk for a clear answer as to what happened during your child's birth. Elk & Elk, proud partner of the Cleveland Browns. Call 1-800-ELK, Ohio. Joining us now on the Fifth Third Money Line, Browns senior staff writer Andrew Gribble. And Gribbs, before we dive into this defense and all of those things, first of all, let me say hello to you. I hope you're enjoying this beautiful sunny Tuesday that we have before things get a little hectic out there.
Yeah, it's beautiful out here. I mean, it's just this has been like the nicest March I think I can remember in like Cleveland history. So means we're due for a sloppy April probably, but just as long as it's nice and looks like this when the draft is.
So it is the sunniest March on record. Least amount of cloud cover for the month of March. It is not the warmest March ever, though that was 2012 with an average temp of, I believe, 63.1 degrees. But it has been a rather nice one. Before we get in the deep dive, though, Gribb, some news from the NFL's Tom Pelissero saying the NFL informed clubs today that they can begin phase 1 of OTAs on April 19th. Per source, players are still allowed to work out at the facility in small groups, as many have been. The NFL and NFLPA will continue to discuss virtual versus in-person meetings and on-field work soon thereafter. Pelissero goes on to say this means no head start for teams with new head coaches who normally could have started on Monday. But unlike a year ago, some players have already been working out in team facilities. There's hope for practices this spring, even if meetings remain virtual indefinitely. And he closes with this one, which is the NFL's ultimate hammer. The NFL and NFLPA have worked collaboratively throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, but if there is no agreed-upon deal on the 2021 off-season rules, normal CBA provisions would apply. In-person workouts and practices would mean players would need to show up to earn any workout bonuses in their contract. So that sounds to me, Gribbs, like we could be headed towards some actual on-field activity in the spring here prior to training camp, which I think would be a good thing, even if meetings remain virtual.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just one step closer to normality. And I don't know if we're ever going to get back to a true state of normal, but, you know, look, the situation is a lot different than it was last year at this time. We know a lot more about this virus, first off, and then secondly, we have vaccines, and that's a big difference than this time last year. And understandably, I think the players saw how successful they were able to have a season with a completely virtual workout. So I imagine there's going to be some middle ground here reached between the teams and players. But as Pelissero noted in that last tweet, I mean, it's on the players to find an agreement because they need they understand they go back to the old CBA rules with this. So it'll be good to see the guys in the spring. I mean, it was just almost too much of a surprise in August when you saw the team on the field after not getting a little warm-up in the spring. And this will be particularly beneficial for the rookies, the guys who joined the team in the draft year coming up.
I agree with you. We were talking earlier on the show. I just hope they find a middle ground, that there's some on-field stuff here prior to training camp. And if they can, maybe they cut that down so you're only here for a month or whatever it may be, I'm fine with that. But I do want to see some level of, that one, on-field stretch, whether it's a mini camp, a rookie mini camp, some degree of OTAs. It doesn't have to be forever, but I do hope that there is something that they do.
Yeah, I just think that the more you play, the better you get. And I think that the players would agree with that. And maybe you don't have to have the extensive off-season workout schedule that you did in the past, but I think it'd be hard to find any players that would think that they played better just because they didn't play as much football in the spring. I think the more you play football, the better your team's going to be.
Agreed. All right, let's bring Gibbe in here. If we get anything more from Tom Pelissero while we were on the air, we certainly will let you know. By the way, Gribbs, two things for you, though, actually, before Gibbe. Number one, Mike Clay was just on the show, fresh off the heels of his dominant BPA performance, and he said he thinks the Browns are going to be the number one seed in the AFC this year.
Wow.
Yeah. How's that feel?
That's we've come a long way.
Right.
Usually you're not talking about on March 30th. Usually all focus is on, we've gone from talking about the number one pick to the number one seed in a few years. So
right.
That's quite a jump in the last few years. So I mean, hey, as we experienced last year, just get in the playoffs. That's all. And then take it from there. I think that's where I'm at with the Browns.
No, you're right about that. The other thing, I don't know if you saw it or not, but The Bucks won the Super Bowl. Bruce Arians got a tattoo to commemorate that. He's getting a tattoo. I'm going to have Taco Bell. That's how I'm going to commemorate their Super Bowl win.
Well, I mean, we did not have – there was no stipulations about tattoos.
No, fortunately. I think you would have felt so strongly about it. You might have made one where if the stipulation was if they didn't win the Super Bowl, I had to get a tattoo, and if they did, you had to. I think you would have taken that in a heartbeat.
I don't put tattoos on the table with anything.
Smart man.
That is a rule to live by, I would just say.
Same. That's why I've made it this far. All right, Gibbs, hop in here, a little deep dive, taking a look at a remade defense, a unit Mike Clay said a top 10 defense in terms of talent in the NFL, and they're still, I think, going to be early draft pick additions and perhaps a Jadeveon Clowney addition still to come. But he said, as it is right now, top 10 unit in the NFL.
Indeed. All right, guys, Gribble, we'll start with you as we take a look at the deep dive on this Browns defense going into 2021. What was the most important signing on defense here in the last 2 weeks? Gribble, I will start with you.
I mean, this is an easy one. I think it's bringing in safety John Johnson. I mean, you're getting a player that, as Andrew Berry said, this is someone that doesn't hit free agency very often because they usually just get re-signed by their team. And he changes, I think, the landscape of your defense. It opens up what you can do with free safeties. It changes what you do in the draft potentially. It's not as much or even a position of need at this point. And he's just a good character guy, good leader. I mean, this checks all the boxes for a free agent side.
Zegura?
Well, I'll go a different way. I'll say Tack McKinley, and that's because without him, I don't know that you have a starting defensive end opposite Myles Garrett. And so with him, you do. And thus, he becomes to me a very important piece of what we have done and what we have signed so far in this offseason. So I'm going to give him he's going to get my nod here. I'm excited about what he's going to bring to this team. I think he is motivated. I think he is hungry. We have talked about all those things. So I'm pretty excited to see, what ultimately he can become for the Cleveland Browns opposite Myles Garrett. First-round talent. There's really no risk involved in this signing, and he's a guy who I think can make a massive difference for us going forward.
All right, Zegura, this one for you to start off.
What
is your biggest position of strength on defense, and did it change since free agency began?
Yeah, I'm going to say the biggest position of strength on this defense for me now is your safety room. And John Johnson, I think, is just one of those studs. I love Ronnie Harrison. I wouldn't even be surprised, Gribbs, if you were thinking about an all-40 team for Ronnie Harrison based on his season last year. And then, Grant Delpit coming back, Sheldrick Redwine, who had big interceptions at multiple times this year. You've got Moffitt and Benton, who are young players that the organization likes. So I would say the safety room right now feels like a big strength of this defense to me.
Gribble, what say you?
Yeah, I'm piggybacking off of that because I just don't know if there's any other contention for number one at this point. I definitely would say it has changed for me in the past 2 weeks just because you had a lot of uncertainty there. I mean, before the John Johnson signing, you had Ronnie Harrison, who you liked what you saw but was limited with injuries, and then you had Grant Delpit, who was out all last year. So I think that one player just makes you look at the room in such a different perspective. I guess I would have said defensive tackle maybe going into free agency, and that's still a strong area, I think, for this team, but I do think you can still get better at that position. And Myles Garrett alone, even with your other depth issues, maybe the position, he's good enough to make that a position of strength for me as well.
Yeah, I like the defensive tackle room a lot now with Sheldon, Billings, Malik Jackson, and Jordan Elliott. I think that's a pretty strong room that they've assembled there that probably stands on its own. You're going to need some more bodies, I think, to be backups there, but that's a room that really stands on its own. I think if you put Clowney in that defensive end room, that would jump to number one for me.
Wow.
Gribble not agreeing with that, I don't think.
Yeah, I think I'll stick with safety. But then I'll defer to what happens in the draft.
Well, here's my case for it. Clowney last year, he didn't have a sack, but he was still an incredibly productive pass rusher, and he was excellent against the run. And he graded out, actually, Pro Football Focus, again, their grades, graded out better than Olivier Vernon did last year. Now, OV was great for us, 9 sacks in his last 9 games. So if you had Miles and Clowney, but now your third is when you think about what we could do in sub-package pass rushing situations, I don't know that who's putting as good of a better trio out there than Miles, Clowney, and Tack McKinley. And, you think about last year, Miles, Vernon, Claiborne, I think we're better, way better, obviously, if we had Clowney and McKinley there. I think that just makes us very formidable.
All right, we move on. Gribble, what position got the biggest boost from the past week? Not name the safety position.
Whew, that's a tough one because I think you spread the wealth along the defense with getting guys back. So I would go with – let me take it in a different direction. I'll go with linebackers because I'm going to lump in Malcolm Smith by re-signing because technically it did happen after the new league year started. I think bringing in Malcolm Smith and Anthony Walker made that position group much more stable than we might have thought it was had you not brought back Malcolm Smith and you entered free agency with letting B.J. Goodson go elsewhere. So I think that group got a big boost by getting those two guys there. And I think that when you look at it now, you've got two guys that have started a lot of games in the NFL, and you got two younger guys in Sione Takitaki and Mac Wilson who you're hoping can take another step next year. And then you look at a defense that might play only two linebackers a lot of time. I think you're all right.
I think that the linebacker room certainly got a boost. I think that in the essence that you are running it back with the swap of Walker for B.J. Goodson. Now, we had Steve Palazzolo yesterday from Pro Football Focus who thought B.J. Goodson had a really nice year and wasn't as sure about that one-for-one swap that the Browns made. I'll go with defensive tackle because, if you look at it and hold the additions of Billings and Malik Jackson to that room with the subtractions being Ogunjobi and Vincent Taylor, who I thought played very well, by the way. I thought Vincent Taylor had a very nice showing. That, to me, got probably the biggest boost. Corner, you're getting greedy and you are getting Troy Hill, but I still think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that room in terms of a significant investment of somebody that you feel real good about them being on the field if they need to be. Which I guess that I skipped ahead to the next bullet point.
You did. The
corner.
Top two positions.
Corner, defensive end.
Gribble, any reason not to agree with that?
Those are the two, and I think you can quibble with the order on that because I still do think you need some more options at the pass rusher position. I just think that's an area where, again, you can never have too much depth at either of these positions. I just think you need more bodies at both, and I think that both can be had in maybe the remaining days of free agency with some players that are still out there, led, of course, by, as Nathan mentioned, Jadeveon Clowney. But there are some corners out there as well where you can get better veteran-wise. And then when you look at this first round and in a lot of mock drafts, it seems like there can at least be a talented pass rusher that maybe you have to watch grow and develop, or you can get a corner that can help you out almost right away in the same way that Greedy did his rookie season. So I think that there's the ability to get better, and I expect the Browns to do that.
If you had a preference right now, and we'll say we're just going to limit it to the rest of free agency in the first round, and the two positions are corner, defensive end, how would you rather go corner in a free agent corner that's still out there and then draft the defensive end, or a free agent defensive end and draft the corner?
Whew, that's tricky because when I look at these, at kind of the way the draft goes, I've almost flip-flopped on the notion of not being able to get kind of a top pass rusher at that 26 spot. But I just think that there's a lot of guys that could fall to the Browns at 26 pass rusher wise. To preview a mock draft, I can't stop staring at Gregory Rousseau potentially getting to the Browns at number 26. I mean, that's someone that had 19 sacks a couple years ago. So I think the way the draft shakes out, I think you may be more intrigued by the pass rushers at 26 than potentially the corners at 26, especially guys like J.C. Horn, Caleb Farley, Greg Newsome. If they're all gone by 26, then I'm less intrigued by the corners at that spot.
So I think I just like the free agent defensive ends that are out there still. I mean, if you could get Clowney or even Aldon Smith, who I thought played very well for Dallas, I would love to add one of those kind of veteran guys into the room because I feel like you've got the young McKinley who's still very young, and you've got behind him, we've kind of hyped Curtis Weaver up into mythic proportions, but I'm curious to see what you've got. Like, at least that's a swing at the plate with a young draft pick type of a player. Corner, I just want to. I feel that we need somebody who can play immediately, and not to say these defensive ends can't play immediately, but my urgency is a little bit maybe less there than at corner. I don't know, and you know, I'm looking through some of these mocks, and they do a good job at the ringer. We've got to get the ringer mock. One of the features that I always like, and this is the mock by Danny Kelly, is they give you the name, they tell you about him, then they give you a shades of, like who's shades of who does this guy kind of remind you of? And Greg Newsome, who I think is a name that would be certainly in play for the Browns at 26, 6'1", 190, ideal pick in terms of excellent length and good ball skills. And they say shades of Marcus Peters. I wouldn't mind adding a young Marcus Peters into our corner room just because I think you can never have enough of those guys. But you're right. You talk about Rousseau. Jalen Phillips had a monster pro day. Owe had a monster pro day. Kwity Paye. There are definitely some edges that could be out there, and I think it's going to be interesting to see when the run on that position starts, because it's not going to be early, but when it happens, there are a lot of teams that could take these edge rushers that go kind of before the Browns.
Yeah, it is interesting just because it seems like these corners have also had really good pro days. Like, I think people are just going nuts over Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn. The one guy who has slipped a bit is Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech because of a back issue, but then that makes you wonder, do you want to it is tricky, but I agree. If you're picking at 26 and you are picking a corner or a pass rusher, odds are that corner gets on the field faster than the pass rusher. It just seems like you said, though, there's a lot of intriguing guys that are having some standout pro days. And again, introduce me to the player that hasn't had a standout pro day. But that said, I mean, there's a lot of athletic guys that could be there at 26 just because this is such a top-heavy draft of offense that you're going to get some value there.
Yeah, it almost feels like a good year for us to be picking where we are, and not that we have – and again, I think they can take best player available regardless of the position, but it feels like this is a pretty good year to be 26 and be focused at edge and corner. Or even off-ball linebacker. Yeah. I don't know that we are focused there, but if we were, again, I continue to believe that internally we regard our linebackers significantly better than the external world does. And also, you got to remember, we're going to play those three safeties quite a bit together. I mean, I think that when that's your best room, that doesn't mean you want to have one of those guys standing on the sideline very often. So I think, corner edge certainly feels like a pretty good spot there. But this is – I think it really is kind of shaping up, and I would say the best thing that we did in free agency is really kind of eliminated huge needs, but there's still positions that you'd want to address, and those seem to line up. And, boy, wouldn't you know, when you have guys who are so prepared and have a plan that all of a sudden pick 26 where it feels like there could be corners and edge rushers available to you, and those are the two positions you're probably targeting early in the draft, that it lines up that way, and I don't think that's an accident.
No, I mean, I just think with the Browns, and again, this is a new world for people with Browns drafting all the way at the bottom at 26. But this is how the good teams stay good. They just play their board, get a position, get the best player they can, and we've seen so many times over and over again, the Steelers and Ravens and all these and the Patriots. Well, maybe not the Patriots, but the Steelers and Ravens always seem to get good players at the bottom of the draft, at bottom of the first round. There's going to be players in this range, whether the Browns take them or not, they're going to make big contributions in the NFL. It's just about getting that guy.
Boy, it's going to be exciting, and the fact that it isn't that exciting is what makes it so great. These pro days are going on. We normally be glued to these things. What do you think about these pro day circuses and whatnot?
I mean, it's interesting. I think they're getting maybe a little bit more attention than they usually did, but I'm just glad that we didn't have to go through the whole combine process and then pretend to care about the pro days again for a second time. But it's weird because it's like you're seeing more of these guys actually do the 40-yard dash and the bench at these pro days, which before they just never did them much because they had already done them at the combine.
Right.
But then we're told to not trust the numbers. So it's just kind of it's weird. I'm ready to go back to the old way. I don't think this is the permanent way of doing things, especially when I saw today that two of the top quarterback prospects in the draft declined to do press conferences. I think we need to go. Let's go back to the combine to make these guys do at least one media session.
Agreed. And I think it's also funny that now you have people whose jobs are to compare the historical discrepancies between certain schools' pro day 40 times and their combine 40 times. And there are numerous schools, as you might guess, especially pretty big ones, whose 40 times are always a lot faster than the 40 times from the combine.
Yeah, I'm going back to my college days, but the thing that every year was without any, it just always seemed to happen is just like when you look at these 40 times for high school recruits, you always hear rumblings of the 40 times that the juniors ran when the pro day was over. Like the up and coming players that were going to be in the draft the next year, you always heard, oh, this wide receiver ran a 4.25. Watch out for him next year, and then it would just be normal next year. I mean, it's just it gets silly season, especially when you're talking about tenths of seconds here, and the difference between tenths of seconds and the 40-yard dash is pretty significant. So people always tend to round down at this time of year with these times.
They most certainly do. Gribbs, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at Andrew_Gribble. The legend, hear him on the BPA. We got Mock Draft 2.0, I'm told, coming out soon, so keep your eyes peeled, Browns fans. I think a big shakeup from the first one, probably for all of us, I think. Is yours a big change of a pick?
Mine is different, yes.
So mine will be as well. Gibbe? Gibbe's like, who did I even pick in the first one?
Yes, always.
Yes, always. All right. Thank you very much, Gribbs. As a reminder, all guests like Sir Andrew who appear on CBD appear via the Fifth Third Money Line, Fifth Third Bank, making Cleveland Browns Daily a Fifth Third better. Coming up next, Nick Shook. The Parade of Stars continues. NFL Network, NFL.com analyst calling in on the Fifth Third Money Line. He is next. Well, welcome back into Cleveland Browns Daily. Some news from the NFL. It is for about the 38th time, it feels like. Actually official, the NFL season will feature 17 regular season games. The enhanced schedule includes additional interconference matchup. The Browns will be playing the Arizona Cardinals this year. This is a monumental moment for the NFL, said Roger Goodell. The CBA with the players and the recently completed media agreements provide the foundation for us to enhance the quality of the NFL experience for our fans. And one of the benefits of each team playing 17 regular season games is the ability for us to continue to grow our game around the world. The 17th game will feature teams from opposing conferences that finished in the same place within their division for the previous season. The AFC was determined to be the home conference for the 17th game in 2021. Also, it means there will be just 3 preseason games for the first time as well. This feels like it has been official 100 times already, but it is now officially official. And joining us now on the hotline, the Fifth Third Money Line, Nick Shook. Nick Shook, it's official, 17 games. How are you reacting to this news that we have heard 17 times?
Officially official, and finally officially official, and not just expected, highly likely.
Yes.
It's going to happen. Now it has happened. I don't know. I feel like I reacted to this a month ago, maybe more. And when we first kind of heard rumblings that this was going to be the format, I thought it was a good idea, and it's also gave the league an easy way to secure some excellent late season matchups across the schedule among contending teams, because it's not that often when you see a team, with the top seed in the conference end up, or in the top, and win the division, fall down to the bottom of that division the next season. So what you're doing is you're essentially guaranteeing more watchable late season games than you have ever had before based on previous standings. And really what it did was gave the league a really easy way to get Packers Chiefs on the docket, something that we missed out on in last year's Super Bowl when the Buccaneers upset the Packers and ended up going on to win the Super Bowl. So they get to get that late in the season this time around. And I think it's going to be worth it. I mean, it's going to be more very watchable football. And the thing I like the most about it is that you're sacrificing a preseason game, because as much as coaches and personnel people will tell you how important the preseason is, 4 preseason games for the longest time has just simply felt like too much. It's felt like too many games for the players who have an established spot on the roster. It's definitely felt too long for NFL fans. It's felt long for you and I'm sure,
Yep.
who by the time you get to the 4th game of the preseason are like, let's just get to the regular season already. Let's get going. I'm ready for some legitimate new tape to watch from these games. So that's good. You got one more game that counts, and they should be good games at the end of the season, which is good for all.
And the Super Bowl this year at SoFi Stadium has officially been moved to February 13th, 2022. Some of the big matchups that come out of this, you mentioned Green Bay and Kansas City, Tampa Bay and Indianapolis, New Orleans, Tennessee, Browns, Cardinals, Cowboys, Patriots, which is not necessarily the same as it would have been 2 years ago, but still an intriguing matchup nonetheless. All right, Nick Shook, you were doing something that I was not able to do, being on the air since 1 o'clock, and I'm sure you were just locked into Pro Day-a-Palooza. So my first question for you is, who won Pro Day, Justin Fields or Mac Jones?
Oh, it's Justin Fields, no doubt, because Justin Fields is the type of player who I think is suited for this type of environment. Mac Jones, the strengths on him, he's a good passer and everything else, but he's a guy who processes quickly, who understands the offense, and is going to execute it accordingly, especially when he's got plenty of talented weapons around him like he did at Alabama. Justin Fields, superior athletic talent to Mac Jones, higher ceiling physically than Mac Jones, but what he needs to work on most is his processing, is the speed at which he makes his decisions and gets the ball out. That was his biggest red flag at Ohio State, especially down the stretch in this past season. So what environment could possibly be better for a guy like that than one in which he's not facing a pass rush or a defense and he's throwing on air in a T-shirt and shorts? So he was going to win this regardless. And then we also got a reminder of how much of, how excellent of an athlete he is. And when he ran, a reported 4.43, 4.40. I mean, that's top line speed. There are running backs. Javonte Williams from North Carolina ran a slower 40 yesterday than Justin Fields is running. So the numbers are going to jump off the charts for you. They're going to grab your attention. And really, they should, because he's an excellent athlete. There's a reason that he was a highly recruited quarterback coming out of high school. There's a reason he was a big splash transfer to Ohio State. And there's a reason that they ended up in the national championship game, because he had a stellar game against Clemson in the Sugar Bowl. The biggest question for him, as you know, and I think as anybody who's watched Ohio State over the last year and a half, and especially this past season, is can he speed up his process? Can he get through his progressions quicker? Can he make faster decisions and get the ball out, stop hanging on to it so long? Because as we know, you go to the next level, the game gets faster. You're going to have to speed up regardless if you want to survive. And he's probably going to have to take 2 steps in that department to be an effective quarterback. If he can do that, the sky is the limit for him because he's physically gifted and talented, as we know. He just got to get that nailed down.
He does. So you like him. What did you make of the 49ers big trade and then sending everybody to the Alabama Pro Day? I think smoke. That's what I think.
Smoke, it's something fun to talk about. I know Daniel Jeremiah kind of did that last week on our air where he basically said, hey, I know this might sound crazy, and I'm not saying I believe in this, but Mac Jones is a guy who is the type of quarterback that would fit well into Kyle Shanahan's offense, kind of reminiscent of a Kirk Cousins, who was a 3rd-round pick, out of Michigan State back in the day, ends up, elevating his play, takes over in Washington, ends up signing a big deal in Minnesota, fully guaranteed. He signs another extension there. He's had a very successful career by all standards. So, of course, you would think, well, that's a natural fit. That's got to be the move, is he wants to look for a quarterback in similar stature, except number 3 overall in terms of picks doesn't really feel like the spot for Mac Jones. As DJ likes to say, the coffee's too rich at that spot, and I agree. So I think that move, was not so much about the smoke that you mentioned, which is fun, but also I think it's more about the quarterbacks who are going to be available there. Because if we're going Trevor Lawrence at 1 to Jacksonville, let's say Zach Wilson goes at 2 to New York. Well, then all of a sudden you've got your pick between Justin Fields and Trey Lance. Justin Fields has a good pro day today, as we expected. Trey Lance was very solid in his pro day as well. Made a couple of wild throws, has some things he has to clean up on his tape, but he can do that over time. You're going to have your pick of either of those 2 guys. And if there's the off chance that the Jets decide that they want to run it back with Sam Darnold, they don't want to draft Zach Wilson, they want to spend it on Penei Sewell or even go as crazy as Jamar Chase and add a big-time receiver to that receiving core that they've already worked on revamping this offseason, then suddenly you've got your pick of the litter. You got all the quarterbacks you could possibly want, not named Trevor Lawrence, at your doorstep, and you can make your decision there. So I think, like they said yesterday, they moved up to gain control, which they felt they did not have at all in their previous position of 12. They said they would be left. They felt like they were going to get left at the altar if they stayed at 12. And I also had this weird feeling. I got this strange just hunch. The head coach of the New York Jets was Kyle Shanahan's defensive coordinator for the past few seasons.
That's right.
Robert Saleh, as everybody knows. If anybody knows what the Jets are thinking about maybe doing at number 2, it's got to be the 49ers. That's got to be connected in some way. I'm sorry, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not sitting here with a tinfoil hat, but we know how this league works. It's all about who you know. It's all about trading of information. They got to have a little bit of an inkling about where the Jets might be leaning. So let's say they don't take Wilson, and Wilson's there for them to take. And it stuns all of us on draft night. Maybe the Niners weren't shocked at all this entire time. So there's a lot of intrigue to it, but I think they're in a great position now.
I don't think that there are any surprises between those 2. And in fact, if we're to believe the reports and believe Kyle and John, they never even started with the Jets to try to make a trade there, because I think they were well aware of what the Jets were doing. And so they knew that the highest they could get was 3. I think you are 100% right on that one. And I think Kyle's having fun with people, trying to figure out what he's going to do. I also think that when you make a trade like that, to your point, what's 1, what's 2. You're doing that for a specific person, and that hay's already in the barn.
Yeah, it is. It's a matter of who that person is. And I think if it wasn't quarterback, it's definitely there. And because it's quarterback and because it's this specific quarterback class and what certain teams' needs are, yeah, I agree that there's that hay is in the barn, but there's also a little bit of uncertainty just because they got to know. I mean, they have to know. We don't know, but they have to know at least a little bit of what is going to happen in front of them for them to do it. Because you're right. You don't give up 3 first-round picks to jump up to 3rd, including the one that you give up your 12th overall. If you're A, not going hunting for a quarterback, you don't make that trade, and B, don't have a pretty good idea of who's going to be available, or you're really sold on one of 2 guys, and you're just going to take the best of either option, and you know that you can't get either unless you move up there. So mortgage the future first-round picks. Why not if you think your window to contend is now? And I think that also we know that opens up that whole other can of worms with their current quarterback situation with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think it's funny because when we first heard the news of this trade, it was basically tacked on at the end Jimmy's still in their plans. Jimmy Garoppolo is still in their plans. And you kind of scoff at it because, well, you're not going to give up all those picks and draft a quarterback and keep the incumbent around and make everything awkward, right? Well, they seemed pretty confident yesterday, and that might just be a good sales job on their part to that they're going to keep him around, that they want him to be QB1 this year, and that maybe they're just preparing for the future. But I also think they've got plenty of examples for a reason to prepare behind him, and that's Jimmy Garoppolo's injury history. And they even kind of mentioned that yesterday. You know, we can't be caught in the same situation we've been the last 3 years. They just can't.
Yeah.
It's not acceptable anymore. They got to get stronger there, and I think they're going to get stronger there. And maybe that includes Jimmy this year. Maybe it doesn't. I still think that there's a little bit of figuring out to do there as well.
I wanted to see them do something crazy, which I know makes no sense in reality, give 3 ones to do what I'm about to say, but if they could figure out a way to finagle Sam Darnold away from the Jets for basically nothing at this point as like a little friendly whatever, and then use the 3rd pick to take Kyle Pitts and run a Kyle Shanahan offense with Kyle Pitts and Kittle, don't you think any quarterback would be good in that offense?
No, it's funny because when they moved up, I started thinking about, okay, so what position are they going to go if they don't take quarterback? And I was like, well, they just signed Trent Williams. So it's probably not going to happen. But Kyle Pitts. And then I thought about the Jets taking Kyle Pitts too, and he's just such an intriguing prospect.
Yeah.
That idea, and especially the way Kyle Shanahan uses multiple tight ends, it makes you salivate as a football fan. That you're just like, man, I can't even imagine. You thought that offense in Atlanta was good with Austin Hooper and Levine Toilolo. Try George Kittle and Kyle Pitts. It's going to explode if you go through the roof. But, of course, that's not going to happen. It's a great dream scenario, though. It's always fun to have those kinds of dreams. It
would be fun. Now, the thing that's the most fun is we're talking about quarterbacks and the top of the draft, and we haven't even reached the Cleveland Browns yet here on Cleveland Browns Daily, who picked 26th in this year's draft, Nick Shook. And, you know, first of all, today, Andrew Berry's birthday. Happy birthday to our great general manager. But what do you think about what the Browns have done so far in free agency to set them up for even maybe some more action in free agency? We know Clowney was in the building, but also, you know, as they get ready for the draft.
Well, you know, it's funny. This is the second off season for the Browns under Andrew Berry, and it feels a lot like the first, but really kind of even better. I mean, I know you and I have talked about this on multiple occasions, but I remember sitting and watching the draft, and especially day 2 and day 3, and just watching these late round picks that he's making that all are just like home run picks that are never going to land on anybody's radar until these guys actually get on the field. But me sitting at home, as we all were watching that draft, was thinking, oh my, that's a fantastic pick. That's perfectly timed. That's great value. It addresses a need. I like this player a lot. You know, that was Harrison Bryant. That was Nick Harris. That was Donovan Peoples-Jones. And that type of off-season operation carried over, and we saw them all contribute in different roles in the 2020 season, helping them go 11-5, reach the playoffs. And then now you take that next step where they go and make the big free agent signings, which they aren't the splashes necessarily, John Johnson aside, because he is a splash. I don't care what anybody says. But they aren't the huge splashes that maybe you saw the year prior when they went out and got Jack Conklin, who was the top right tackle on the market. They got Austin Hooper, who was the top tight end on the market in that offseason. But they were such savvy pickups again to me. I mean, John Johnson, of course, I think he's a top 5 safety in the NFL. People in L.A. loved him. The Rams organization, they had anybody close to that organization, anybody who covers that team has nothing but great things to say about him. I think the Browns got a winner, and he's going to pair really nicely with Grant Delpit, who's coming back from injury. And then I also really love the signings of guys like Malik Jackson and Tack McKinley. I was actually talking with my dad about this earlier today. I think if Tack McKinley can be healthy, a lot of people are going to be surprised by him. And the reason I say that is the first 2.5 years he was in Atlanta, he was very effective. I mean, He was one of the promising rookies in the NFL, and then he got hurt. The Falcons kind of ended this phase where they didn't really have a direction one way or the other. Dan Quinn gets fired this past season. They didn't pick up Tack's 5th-year option, which I'm sure upset him a little bit. And he eventually is like, look, we're not going anywhere here. I want out. I want a new opportunity, a fresh start somewhere else. He's going to get that in Cleveland, and based on the way that their roster is set up right now, which could change a little bit with the draft, he's going to get a significant amount of reps opposite Myles Garrett. So I think that's the perfect environment for somebody with his talent to flourish and surprise a lot of people. And those are the types of pickups, those are the types of signings that Andrew Berry has quickly proven he is capable of making over and over again, that builds that second, that middle third of your roster into a strength, and where depth becomes key late in the season. And then you see those players rise up and contribute and help your team win close games. That's the difference between 8-8 and 11-5 in the NFL, or worse than 8-8.
Well, now
and I think
8-9,
stay on that track.
12-5 now, Shook.
Yeah, we got to get used to this now, right? We got to go 11-6, 12-5, 13-4, 14. I get that's going to take months. That might take years, Nathan. That might take years for me to figure it out.
I just like that 500 record's not possible anymore. It's out. I mean, yeah, we could have the 8-8-1. I guess that's still in play, but I'm not going to expect that to happen very often.
Let's just abolish ties while we're at it.
Agreed. These guys put way too much week in and week out to have what happens on a Sunday or a Monday, whatever, end with a no contest, the same result as if it never had happened. Agreed.
Yeah, and it makes the standings look really weird too. You have that third column, all the numbers get bunched up. It's just not visually appealing. It's not fun for anybody. Let's determine a winner by any means necessary.
That's the goal. All right. Do you want to see the Browns sign Jadeveon Clowney?
At the right price, I could see it. I was pretty surprised by how quickly it seemed his visit was, how long it was reported, and then he was out of town a few hours later, which I know they don't last forever, but it just felt quicker than usual.
A get-to-know-you visit. He had never been in the room with Stefanski and Barry and Joe Woods, and none of them have ever met him personally, and I think it was just a get-to-know-you from the Browns standpoint as well as that of Jadeveon Clowney, and by all accounts, everybody liked it. Everybody felt very good about the meeting and being in the room with the others.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the Browns were in the talks last year at this time and even later in the pursuit of Clowney, and they never even got that opportunity because of the pandemic. So I guess it's baby steps towards something like this, but you got to get him at the right price, and that's because he wasn't productive last year. He simply wasn't. Yeah, he didn't register a sack. His season ended early because of injury. Tennessee was weird. I don't put that entirely on Clowney because it was kind of a weird environment last year. They had multiple additions just fail to live up to expectations, whether it was, Vic Beasley, who kind of prolonged like this strange holdout where he just didn't come to camp, even though he just signed as a free agent and then finally decided he was going to show up. Of course, going amid the pandemic and everything else going on, then he was a non-factor. Jadeveon Clowney is a late addition after waiting out his market to almost a fault, and then he's mostly a non-factor. Just multiple guys not living up to the expectation there. It was their first season without Jarrell Casey on the interior, and I think they just missed his veteran presence and leadership as well. And so I don't hold all of that against Clowney, but over the course of his career, he's been a guy who has flashed more than been consistent. I do like to look back to his tape in Seattle. He was a game wrecker, when he got traded to Seattle for most of that season, playing through injury too, and was really, really effective. I kind of wish, deep down, I wish he would have just taken the initial offer from the Seahawks and stuck around and been an effective player there than doing this free agent, this nomadic journey he's been on for the last year and a half as a free agent, bouncing from team to team. So with all that being said, he would be a nice addition to the Browns, but I worry about the fanfare that comes with it and the expectation because he, for the majority of his career, has not been the guy who has lived up to the first-round pick expectation, the number one overall pick expectation. He's been there at times, just hasn't been consistent enough. If you don't need to rely on him, playing opposite Myles Garrett, ideal situation for him to find success, much like Takk McKinley. It's just that more eyes are going to be on him. So it's a little bit of I'm a little bit on the fence on this, but if you get him at the right price, you don't spend too much money on him, then let's go ahead and do it, Browns.
I really think she's somebody Jadeveon Clowney, he is somebody who, when you think about McKinley, Clowney, Garrett on the field together in our sub packages, could just be a game wrecker. I mean, he didn't have the sacks last year, but Pro Football Focus actually said he graded him higher than they graded Olivier Vernon, who was great for us last year.
Yeah, Vernon had a very good year. Finally, he had a very good year in Cleveland, the last of his deal there. Kind of a bummer to see him go. Of course, it was really a bummer to see him suffer an injury late in the season as well. So, yeah, I mean, grades-wise, it's there. You're right. It's there. It's just that it's got to be at the right price for me. You can't be handing out a J.J. Watt deal, which he's not going to get. Nobody's going to give him that at this point. But you can't be handing out that type of money to somebody who has got to prove it a little bit more, but could have a greater potential here than with other teams.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see this defense, though, go to work and what Joe Woods is finally going to be able to play the defense that he wanted to. I mean, he really had to pivot last year and go with a completely different defensive style and philosophy than he wanted without even the personnel he wanted. And I think, what he did last year was pretty tremendous. And now he might have the chance to really unleash it, which could be very exciting for the Browns.
Yeah, that defense, if you look at it level by level, there was only one strength. It was the defensive front, which is what we all expected. But you lose Delpit in camp. Greedy's out for the entire year because of the nerve issue with him. And your linebacking core is essentially a patchwork linebacking core thrown together with some veterans, and then you got Taki and Wilson. You're better in every area, at least on paper, at this point a year later. So it should be really exciting to see because, the Browns got to the divisional round were within one score of beating the reigning champions with a defense that was essentially not playing it as in the style that its coordinator wanted it to be in the entire season, and without a lot of its players that it anticipated, and yet they were kind of punching up and still doing a pretty bang-up job against an
Got a break here soon.
You remedy that, you get stronger there, which we all know has been their biggest need this entire offseason. You're starting to look like a pretty strong team heading into September.
We certainly are, Nick Shook. We appreciate the time. We will talk about it more as we get closer. Perhaps we're even going to maybe see some on-field workouts this offseason. The great Nick Shook. Follow him on Twitter at the Nick Shook. Always a pleasure, brother.
Always, D. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right, you got it. All right, we'll be back. So much more to come when we wrap things up here on Cleveland Browns Daily. All right, just a reminder, by the way, all guests who appear on CBD appear via the Fifth Third Money Line, Fifth Third Bank, making Cleveland Browns Daily a Fifth Third better. Big thanks to Mike Clay. Big thanks to Sir Andrew Gribble and Nick Shook for stopping by today. We got a big show lined up for you again tomorrow, but as Pro Day hype goes on, one thing I want to let you all know is my guy Tutu Atwell, 4.3240. Woo! Blazing. The next level is next.